Sicha inside, Gimel, where the Rebbe shares a. You hear me?
Almost.
Okay, that doesn't count in many cases. Where the Rebbe shares a story, famous story, about what Chassidus is. Von Rebbe der Schwer, from the previous Rebbe, was hat übergepflanzt und eingepflanzt the Lubavitcher yeshivas in America. He replanted and planted the Lubavitcher yeshivas in America. Haben wir gehört viel Erzählungen wegen dem alten Rebbe. He related many stories about the alten Rebbe. Von die viele Erzählungen will ich euch bleiben eine. The Rebbe says, I want to choose one story from the many stories the previous Rebbe said about Yitzchak Kislev. Was ich rechnen, which I measure, I assume, consider. Thank you. As he is zugepasst to the Gelegenheit. It's befitting for this opportunity, occasion. An Erzählung was charakterisiert, which characterizes und geht an Reinblick in dem Shitta von Lubavitch and Chabad. The following story characterizes and gives a glimpse in the approach of Lubavitch and Chabad. Es ist gewesen in die Zeiten, wenn der Mittler Rebbe, nachher später geworden der Maler Mekev von seinem Vater Alten Rebbe, gelebt zusammen mit dem Vater. The story takes place during an era when the Mittler Rebbe, who later would become the successor of his father, the Alter Rebbe, was living together with his father. The Mittler Rebbe in Demot gehat Kinder, he already had children. And among his children, there was a very young child. The Alter Rebbe had gelebt in zweiten Etage. The Alter Rebbe lived on the second floor of the house. And the Mittler Rebbe is an untersten ground floor. The Mittler Rebbe lived on the lower floor, which was the ground level. Amol, it happened once, when the Mittler Rebbe is gesessen und gelernt, the Rebbe was sitting and learning, is a kind schlafendig, gefallen vom Wiegel. A kid that was sleeping fell out of his carriage, or as happens sometimes by a child. When it gave him a vein, and he started to cry. The Mittler Rebbe is when Azefar tift in learning. The Mittler Rebbe was so involved in depth in his learning, as there is garnet gehört and invited Fergus them learning. He didn't hear it at all. Not only did he not hear his phone ringing and vibrating and the doorbell ringing, but he didn't even hear the baby crying. The Alter Rebbe, Chacher is given an Eberstein floor. The Alter Rebbe was on the second floor, which is much further away from the baby. When his Eich given for Tifton learning, he was also very involved in his learning. From deswegen that heard him given from kind. He still, nonetheless, he heard that the baby is crying. And Mafse given them learning. He stopped learning. At Rabbi gegangen auf untersten floor, he went down to the lower level. Reingelegt dem Kind in Vigela und ihm eingestillt und verwickt. He put him back into the carriage, the baby's crib, and he quieted him and he rocked him until he was, back asleep. The Alter Rebbe erklärt seinen Sohn, and then he explained to his son, the Mittler Rebbe, as der nicht der Herren, dem Kind's Weinen, wie viel man soll nicht sein vertieft in dem Lernen, ist nicht kein Derech. Not hearing a child's cry, as deep as you are in your learning, that's not the proper way to behave. This, the Rebbe says, is a story he's choosing because it represents what the Shitta of Chabad Lubavitch is. The Rebbe der Schwer hat es abgeteilt, he explained it, as wie vertieft man soll nicht sein in eigenem Lernen, or the davening as deep as a person may be in his own learning or davening, other in tongue gute Sachen bechlal, or in general you're up to good things, not from B'shas Ma'aseh, that Hernem and Yidish Kind veint. Even while you're doing those beautiful stuff, you have to feel and hear that a Jewish child is crying. Without mafsik sein von dem davening, other from them learning, and then as the kids are to stop what you're doing, davening or learning, and see to it that the child should stop crying. And if they're fun upgelernt, as wie heich man soll allein nicht sein, as high as a person may be, und wie great is all nicht sein, die in Yonim Mevachem and is phenomenon, and it's great and lofty, the things that we're involved in may be. The Baal Tabra says, da Yiddish kind was month, and as felt him, there's a Jewish child that's demanding, he's lacking something. Darf das der Herren, you have to perceive it, you have to hear it. When you got to put away your own things on the side, and again, these own things are davening and learning. It's not just hobbies. When Zuchen aids as the kids will offer and find solutions, so that the child will start crying. This is the story, and this is the teachings, as the Rebbe, that the Frierdiker Rebbe explained the message from the story to us. Then the Rebbe continues. The uplearning der von Spitzel in unserer Zeit and Arbeit. There's a lesson for this specifically to our time and our work. Die letzte Jahren, man merkt sich eine starke Aufwachung bei jedem Bechlal, bei jüdischer Jugend befragt. Lately, in the recent years, you notice a very strong awakening among Jews in general and among Jewish youth in particular. And at Ongem is Zuchen Yiddishkeit. They started to look for Yiddishkeit. Was is sehr viel bei 18-Jährige und 20-Jährige, afilu, even by 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, und nachher afil größer Mas by 13-Jährige und Ingere, and even on a greater level, 13-year-olds and younger kids are looking, youth is looking for Yiddishkeit. When I say by younger verheiratete Parfolk, and even by young couples that are just married, newlyweds, Kinder was an alt fear the they have children that are 4 or 5 years old, they're looking for them. There's an awakening by them as well. They're looking, they're searching, they want to give their kids Yiddishkeit. When we also feel, when it's zugekommen, sof zum Emes, they reach the truth. As I will have an richtige Yiddishkeit, you want authentic Yiddishkeit. It came for Wasserta, unpshartis, you don't want to have any watered down Yiddishkeit. You want to have it without any type of compromises, the real deal. Was der Vater wird alt starker, der Verlangen, and therefore it gets even stronger, the demand and the desire, will geben die Kinder an Erziehung, welche ist gegründet und gebeten im ganzen Leben unserer Lebendigkeit. And therefore, there is even stronger the demand that we should give our children and give youth a true, authentic Yiddishkeit, which is built solely on Torah. Was sie bringt Emerson Leben, and then Tag Telech Leben, this brings true life in the daily life of a person. And thus, this, says the Rabbi, is the uplearning from the Ibn Etzelt and Sipur. This is the message that we have from this above-mentioned story of the Mittler Rebbe. In was Eden soll nicht sein vernommen, whatever Eden are involved in, was sicher is nach vernommen mit gute Sachen und wichtige Sachen. We're definitely involved with good things and with important things. Zieh Janim von Parnassa, zieh verschiedene nötige Sachen, whether it's Parnassa things, earning a living, or other various types of important endeavors. Is when es kommt aber zu der Frage von jüdische Kinder, when it comes to the question of Jewish children, v'chavenen und lechzen nach jüdischer Erziehung, which cry, and lechzen would mean strive for Jewish education, is the problem und die Arbeit hat a Vorzug, a priority. This problem and this work takes a priority when a Jewish child is crying, and kommt for alle andere Sachen in welchem man ist vernommen. It comes before everything else that a person may be involved in. Again, it's like even though the Mittler Rebbe was sitting and learning, the Alter Rebbe was learning, he heard the cry of the baby and went to help him. We have to put the maximum effort. If given the Meglachkeit to the Meisters, to give the opportunity to the institutions, yeshivas and chadarim, that educate Jewish children with a proper Jewish education. As they on Kenner, the maximum Kinder, they should be able to accept the maximum amount of kids, was is nor meglich aufzunehmen as much as possible. Was leider ist der Matze, was Sach Kinder bleiben if the gas mit Saddam was the yeshivas haben die Mittel zu öffnen nach Kitas. Unfortunately, the reality is a lot of kids are remaining outside, says the Rebbe, because the schools don't have the ability to open new classes, or the Ufnam and Nachrash yeshivas, or to hire new teachers. The Rebbe continues, "Is leider voran Azena Heiser with the Kinder feeling garnet as they felt a person the Rebbe Venen Zenit." Now there is another situation where, till now we spoke about kids that are crying, but unfortunately you have situations where kids are not even crying; they don't even feel that they're missing something. See, die Kinder is die Pflicht, to die Kinder is die Pflicht und die Aufgabe asach größer. To these children that are not even crying, the requirement, the demand we have, the responsibility is even greater. From das Gufa was a vesen garnet, as a darfen venen, the fact that they don't know at all that they even have to cry, is a raya as a netigen sich in a Yiddish Erziehung. It means that they need a Jewish education. They're not even crying about it. They don't even realize that they're missing it. In a viel größer Maß, in a much greater degree. Das ist eine von den Aufgaben, was die Yeshivas darfen sich stellen befragt. This is one of the standards and the requirements that Yeshivas have to work on. Aufnahme Talmidim von allerlei Kreisen, to accept children from all different places, communities. On keine Begrenzungen without any limits. On kein Unterschied sie kommen von einer Kreis, as Weslak upon them as es fällt etwas, whether they come from a community and an upbringing that they know that they're missing something, like we brought before, that a person is crying because they're looking for Yiddishkeit. Sie von einer Kreis was weiß gar nicht, as they darf weinen, or they don't even know that they have to cry. They don't realize they're missing Yiddishkeit. Und geben jedem von sie die vollste Masse von Yiddish Erziehung, and give each one of them the maximum amount of Jewish education. Das wird sie führen auf dem Weg von sein glücklich, sehr ganze Leben. And giving them Jewish education will lead them to be lucky, or not lucky, but happy, joyous. their whole life. Sayin Gashmi, Sayin Ruchnis, both in material and in spiritual. In addition, es ist echt da eine Ablehnung von dem eben der Matten Sipper Benegets in allgemeiner Weltlage. There's also a lesson from this story about the general situation in the world. We zijn eerst rein in een nieuw jaar. We just entered a new year, which means from Rosh Hashanah. The nieuwe kind, die Welt in the nieuw jaar, a new child. The world is in a new year. Und leider in der Lage von einem kleinen Kind, was ist ausgefallen von der Wiggle. Well, unfortunately, a situation of a little child. In other words, we're a baby because it's a new year, and that fell out of the crib. Abgegangen von dem richtigen Track, we left the true track, the true way, und wissen nicht, wie einzustellen sich. We find ourselves in a time globally that people are falling out of their bed. They don't know how to behave. Seien der Beziehungen zwischen Völkern, both in relation between nations, sei zwischen verschiedene Kreisen, both among different communities and facets, wie zu ist, nutzen die Möglichkeiten, was die Menschheit hat, if buien und besser zu machen. We don't know, we fell off the path, how to use out the opportunity that we have as humans, how to deal with one another, to build and to improve. Und nicht verkehrt, if chore machen und ärger machen. Not the opposite, to destroy and to make worse. Und in dem haben wir die Ablehnung von dem eben der Wattensipper, and we have this lesson from the above mentioned story of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, if wir warnen zwei entgegensetzen, setzte Tosen, to forewarn two mistakes. Sometimes a person could think, as if I'm busy with my own business dealings, my own stuff, my responsibilities. Why do I care what's happening in the world generally? I'm up to minding my own business. What's going on around me, especially if it's a different country, why should I care? Now we see clearly. The Rebbe is saying this in 1963.
53?
63.
63.
Yeah. And the Rebbe says that now we see clearly that even things that happen on the other side of the world, in a distant corner of the world, and they affect everyone. How much more so today?
When in 1963?
When was it?
Yeah.
In the Thursday of Parshas Noach, which let's say would be the month of Cheshvan.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Seine Negea Yederin und oft bis in sein private level. You see now that what happens on the other side of the world does affect other people and even in your own private life. That's one mistake. At zweite Todestein, another mistake that happens. Mi ani umani, was ken ich oftan? A person says, fine, it does affect me, but who am I to affect change? I'm a nobody. And I say weiter. The MS is aber, as jeder ken oftan. The truth is, every single person could accomplish, could achieve. When the erklärt in Gemara and Rambam, as is explained in Gemara and Rambam, when the später the Kislev, as b'shas jeder with machen lichtlicher in sein Winkel, when every person will make it a little bit brighter in his own corner and not saying, oh, who am I? With the emes lich, with the true light, which is Torah mitzvahs, is that Eberster Maftiach, Hashem promises, as durch dem, mit nicht nur sein eigener Leben werden besser und geringer, aber durch dem wird ich beitragen in sein Chilik in dem allgemeinen Leben von der ganzen Welt. Second mistake that people make is they say, fine, it's important, but I can't affect any change because I'm a little person. And the answer is that the reason why it's a mistake is because when a person illuminates his own corner with learning, with the light of Torah, it impacts the Eibishter promises that not only will your own life get better and easier, but you're also going to affect your section in the world, and through this, the whole world. When the world will come closer to tzedek and yesher, justice and righteousness, teiv, the kedusha, good and holiness. When die keches, welche treiben die Welt, if hebech hashalim, and these forces, which are pushing and campaigning the world to be the opposite of peace, so the first problem is that why does it affect me? And we have to know that we see today that it affects us. Something that happens in the other corner of the world has an impact. And the second thing is the mistake that we think we can't affect it, we could. And by a Yid behaving properly, the mitzvahs, it affects himself and the world around. In dem Tätigkeit geht rein zum allem ersten die Gesetzführer verstärken die MS jüdische Erziehung. And how to do this? What's the way to go about it? As you said before, step one is to strengthen true Jewish education. Von jüdische Kinder bekommen im Shem of Jewish children, wherever they may be. Was durch dann verspäten die Licht von Torah und Mitzvahs, der Mitzvah wird Torah. Step one is education of youth, And by doing so, wherever these children may be, we are spreading Torah mitzvahs, which is the candle of a mitzvah, and the Torah is the light. We have the promise of Hashem. As does it bring glick to the all of us. It'll bring the right word for glick, not luck.
Fortune.
Fortune. Thank you. It's going to bring good fortune to anyone that's involved in this. But the stark and the keches from good in the world is going to strengthen the good strengths in this world. Because a soft call and they will be victorious. We're going to win them over. We're going to say that even from the ganze Welt from Galus, we're going to be zeicha that Mashiach is going to come. He's going to take out Jewish people and the whole world out of Galus. The Eberster soll helfen. Hashem should help. As man soll tun das alles in guten, gesund, with good health, with Freudigkeit und betuv levav, with joy and with gladness of heart. Was das wird meisem sein in dem Tätigkeit, as man wird tun in a viel größer for them, it's going to help that we're going to do even in a much greater capacity. From later lage is, if you look at the situation now, is wie viel man soll nicht vergessen in the yeshivas, that man gefinnen Kinder, man soll anfüllen alle Zimmer und alle Kitas. We see that as greater, as much as we enlarge, expand, the yeshivas will find more children that are going to fill these rooms and classes. And thus, it makes an eichen der aslacha of Hashem, which will add in the success and in the bracha of Hashem. In summary, the Alter Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe said a story, and he chose this story. The Rebbe says, I'm choosing this story from all the stories that the Frierdiker Rebbe said about the Alter Rebbe because it expresses what Chabad Lubavitch is about. And that is the story of the Mittler Rebbe falling out of his crib, the Mittler Rebbe learning. He lived on the first floor. The Alter Rebbe lived on the second floor. And they were both learning, respectively, in their places. And on the ground floor, there was a baby that fell out of his crib and was crying. The Mittler Rebbe did not hear because he was so into the learning. The Alter Rebbe on the second floor heard, and he came down. And he picked up the baby and rocked the baby and quieted the baby. And then he told the Mittler Rebbe that this is not a derech. As deep as you may be in learning and davening, whatever it is, if a child is crying, you have to hear it. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said the lesson that we have from this is that we have to hear a child's cry. As lofty and stuff that you're in, learning, davening, or good things, if there's a child crying, you have to feel it. And the Rebbe explains to us that's the idea of what's going on in the world now with chinuch, that there's an awakening. Jewish youth, 19, 20-year-olds, 13-year-olds, even younger, even little kids, their parents are looking for chinuch for them. We have to make it available, make it accessible, because the child's crying. Then you have children that are not crying. They don't know they should be crying. And we got for these kids, the Rahmanas is even greater, because they don't even realize that. And for sure, we have to go out there and do everything we can. And it's a priority. It comes before the other things that a person may be involved in, is to make sure that there's chinuch. But went on to explain another lesson is globally. That when something goes on in the world, we could impact it. First of all, it affects us because everything affects each other. And we have the ability, by us doing something in our corner, adding in light and so on, it affects the whole world.
Shkoyach.
Amen.